In 1237, the country of Goryeo was at war with the Mongols, a conflict that had begun in 1231. Goryeo only won once while the Mongol invasions were still ongoing. During the war, there are bodies and chaos everywhere. People are searching for weapons in every corner. A young boy and a girl are hiding behind some wooden slacks, when one of the soldiers notices the cries of that little girl and walks beside them. The young boy hopes that they don't find them, and then the soldier turns away without searching. Just then, an old man finds them and decides to use them as slaves. The young boy grabs his wooden sword and tries to protect his sister while the old geezer walks towards them with a sword, wanting to kill them. Just then, the general shows up and asks the soldier what he is doing. The soldier tells him that they found two boys hiding and wants to kill them. However, the general looks at them with a creepy smile on his face and says that it would be a waste to just kill them as they should have some fun with those soft bodies first. He then orders the soldier to bring the iron skewer from his horse. When the soldier walks towards the horse, he finds another boy standing in front of them and wonders why there is still one alive. He also thinks that if he's not trying to run, he must be scared out of his mind. The general then asks the soldier about the boy, and he replies that he seems to be out of his mind. The general then orders him to kill him quickly and bring the skewer, before his mood dies. However, when the soldier tries to move, the young boy kills him in an instant. After that, the general completely loses his composure and comes charging at him with his sword raised, but the young boy reaches out and snaps the blade clean in half using nothing but one hand like it is made of nothing. Without missing a beat, he then uses just 2 fingers to deliver a precise and decisive strike that snaps the general's head back and puts him down for good. The young boy stands there in the aftermath and finds himself genuinely stunned by what just happened, his mind racing as he tries to process how effortlessly he just took down a Mongol general that everyone had spoken about with such fear and respect, especially given that the adults had always talked about a warrior in Goryeo who was so fearsome that even the Mongols themselves were afraid of him. The boy then turns away from all of that and walks over to where the young children are huddled together, and he takes a moment to acknowledge them and thank them for the courage they showed and for the way they managed to look out for and protect each other through everything. He then tells them in a calm and steady voice that he is going to go and deal with every last one of the threats still out there before coming back for them and asks them to stay hidden and keep out of sight just a little while longer until he returns. After that, the story steps back in time and gives us a look into the man's past, starting with the moment his older brother gave up his own life to protect him. During that difficult stretch of their lives they had been attacked on multiple occasions and were constantly on the run trying to survive, and during those times his brother had sat him down and told him everything he needed to know about who their father Manjiak really was as a person and the circumstances surrounding how he had died. Not long after all of that, the young boy ends up getting captured by a group of people and finds himself being handed a knife and thrown into a situation where he has no choice but to use it to defend himself against whoever comes at him. In the meantime, a guy is having a cup of tea in the building, saying winning the match is important, but in fighting arena, the spectator's opinion of how exciting the fight is matters just as much. A girl named Hongseal, who is the arena owner, tells him that a match between 6 ordinary slaves who haven't become his warriors or arena fighters yet, versus his man is a useless fight with obvious outcome. She also says that she can't agree to a match when she knew from the start she will be losing a deal. However, the guy says that he will pay her the price of 20 slaves whether she win or lose and she won't need to pay out any winnings. Hongseal then realizes that this guy is completely insane. She then tells him that she appreciates the offer, but it doesn't fit with her arena's principles. Hongseal's assistant leans in and quietly lets her know that this particular guy has some seriously powerful people backing him up behind the scenes, and while she is not thrilled about the situation at all, she makes it clear that there is no good reason to go out of their way to make an unnecessary enemy out of someone like that. Hongseal's assistant then turns to the guy and tells him smoothly that they will get everything prepared right away and follows that up by asking which warrior he is planning to send into the match on his end. The guy responds by saying that he is going to put his own personal bodyguard into the fight, and just one look at the bodyguard makes it obvious that this person is on a completely different and dangerous level compared to anyone else in the room. Hongseal then steps in and lays out her honest assessment of the situation, explaining that under normal circumstances even if all 6 slaves were to rush the bodyguard at the same time, they would still amount to nothing more than a disorganized and chaotic mob with no real coordination between them, which means they would not even come close to being proper opponents for someone of that caliber. However, she follows that up by noting that every once in a while, someone unexpected and unusual turns up among the ordinary slaves, someone who does not fit the pattern and cannot be so easily dismissed. With that in mind, Hongseal turns to the guy and tells him plainly that he needs to keep one important thing in the back of his head going into this, which is that his bodyguard could very realistically end up dying in that arena. After all of that is said and done, the slaves are sent down into the arena gripping their swords with shaking hands and fear written all over their faces. The thought running through each of their minds as they step in is that if they can somehow find a way to win this fight, they are going to walk away with payment in their hands, and with that money they just might be able to buy back their own freedom. One of the slave then steps forward, saying he might look pathetic now, but he used to live by the sword, and if they make it out alive and get paid, each of them will hand over 60%. Right at that moment, the official's bodyguard comes marching in, and the sheer size of him is enough to make everyone stop and stare, with a giant sword gripped firmly in his hand that makes the whole situation feel even more intimidating than it already was. The moment the slaves get a good look at him, fear spreads through the group instantly, and they start questioning among themselves whether they could realistically stand any kind of chance against someone built and armed like that. The official, however, shifts his attention away from all of that and notices that there are only 5 slaves standing there in front of him, and another guy nearby quickly jumps in and tries to smooth things over by saying that it must have been some kind of mix-up and that the manager is going to fill that last empty spot right away without any further delay. Without wasting any more time, the official reaches over and hurls the young boy from before straight down onto the ground like he weighs absolutely nothing. Hongseal watches that happen, and the shock hits her hard as she struggles to process the fact that they are actually throwing a child to the ground that carelessly. The official's bodyguard then snaps into action and charges at the group of slaves with full force, and in the chaos of the attack he manages to catch one of them with his blade and slice through them. He then turns and moves toward the young boy, who in that split second of danger finds his mind flashing back to the memory of watching his brother die, and somehow that memory is enough to snap him into focus as he pushes his body out of the way and dodges the incoming strike. Seizing the moment, the boy pulls out his knife and starts landing blows directly on the giant's face one after another, refusing to back down despite the overwhelming size difference between them. The moment the young boy finishes off his opponent, the entire crowd absolutely erupts into cheers for him, losing their minds over the fact that he just pulled off something that even most of the seasoned and experienced fighters in this place have never been able to do. One particular guy standing there thinks back to the moment when that merchant first brought the boy to him and admits to himself that he had not known what to expect at all when he first laid eyes on him. The merchant had made a point of telling him that this was not the kind of boy you just toss aside the moment he picks up an injury, explaining that even with the wounds he was carrying at the time, the boy had not let out a single groan or sound of pain through any of it. The merchant had also pointed out that the way the boy kept bouncing back and recovering during his sleep was unlike anything normal, comparing it to the natural healing of a wild animal and suggesting that he seemed like someone who was simply born with the body of a warrior. The guy, however, makes it clear to himself that it was not the merchant's words alone that convinced him of any of this, but rather the sword wounds he saw covering the young boy's body with his own eyes that settled it for him. He thinks about how those particular cuts are the kind that only come from a long blade, the type of precise and powerful strikes that only someone at a master level would be capable of landing. He also lets himself think ahead a little, figuring that once this kid starts making a real name for himself out on that arena stage, there is going to be a whole lot of opportunity and attention heading his way because of it. It turns out this guy is none other than Wyrang himself, the vice owner of the entire arena operation. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, another official standing nearby cannot wrap his head around what he just witnessed, finding it almost impossible to believe that the young boy is moving with the kind of light and controlled footwork that belongs to someone operating at a master's level. Light footwork is when they use chi to speed up how fast their muscles contract and expand with repeated motion. It can be applied to running, making their speed jump dramatically. At a master's level, the speed of muscle movement increases even more, so their power goes up to a degree and their jumping distance grows. He also thinks that it's amazing to see that young kid can use light footwork at a level that even speeds up his sword swings. Hongseal then turns to Wyrang and tells him to get the place cleaned up and make sure the guest is properly seen off before anything else. After that is handled, the guard rounds up all the slaves and calls them over to head back inside after handing over their weapons, but the young boy completely ignores the instruction and just stands there like he is somewhere else entirely in his head. The guard figures the boy is just completely out of it and riding some kind of high from having just killed someone for the first time and decides to drive a kick straight into him to snap him back to reality. The other slaves watch that happen and the shock of it lands hard on all of them as they stand there not knowing how to react. Right at that moment, another guard walks over and lets them know in a completely flat that getting hit is just a regular part of life around here, and that people have died from a lot less, so they had better get used to it quickly. Then out of nowhere, the guard who had just kicked the boy suddenly notices something is wrong and looks down to find that he is bleeding, and the confusion on his face is obvious as he tries to work out where the cut even came from, eventually piecing together that he must have caught the edge of the sword the boy had been holding at the exact moment his kick connected. The young boy then slowly pushes himself back up onto his feet and drops straight into a fighting stance, and the sight of it catches absolutely everyone around him completely off guard and sends a ripple of surprise through the whole group. The guard, who is now bleeding, does not take any of that lightly and immediately gets furious, snatching up his sword and deciding that this boy has clearly lost every last bit of his mind after what he just went through in that arena. Before he could do anything, another official named Bar steps forward and tells the boy to put the knife down. The young boy is trying to take everything in but finds that he cannot really make out what Bar is saying to him properly, and he thinks to himself that his head is still foggy and not fully clear from everything that just happened. He takes a moment to look Bar over and notices that he is completely unharmed and is not even standing in any kind of aggressive or attacking stance, which leads the boy to figure that Bar does not appear to have any intention of coming after him. At the same time though, he is very aware that there are still other people around him who are actively trying to attack him, and on top of that he has no idea where he even is right now, so he knows he needs to keep his guard up no matter what and not let himself get caught off balance. One of the slaves then speaks up and tells everyone that the reason the boy is not responding is because he cannot understand what Bar is saying to him. The guards turn to the slave and tell him to go ahead and explain what he means by that. The slave then tells them that he had heard the boy talking to himself at some point, and that when he did he was speaking in the Goryeo language. The slave follows that up by mentioning that he himself actually knows how to speak Goryeo, and offers to give it a try and see if he can get through to the boy by communicating with him in his own language. Deep down the slave is genuinely frightened about stepping forward and putting himself in the middle of a tense situation like this one, but the fact that this boy had just saved his life makes it impossible for him to just sit back and do nothing when he might actually be able to help. Bar takes that in and gives the slave the go-ahead, and the slave then slowly makes his way toward the young boy. He thanks him for fighting as he and the others were able to live. He then says that the fight is over now, so he should put that knife down. However, the young boy gets even more mad because he couldn't even save his brother. The boy ends up giving the weapon, and Bar thinks that what surprised him more than his light footwork was how bold he was. Later on, Hongseal pulls Bar aside and asks him what his honest take is on the young boy, and Bar gives her a straightforward answer, telling her that if the question is purely about whether the boy's skills are good enough to bring in profit for the arena, then yes, he clears that bar without any problem. But if she is asking whether he fits what she is truly working toward in a deeper sense, then he falls short of what she is looking for. Bar then goes into more detail and explains that when someone reaches a high level of skill at a young age, people tend to throw the word genius around pretty freely to describe them, but in his view that is not what real genius actually looks like. A true genius, he says, is someone who climbs to a level that nobody else can even come close to reaching or touching. Bar also points out that the boy has already stepped into the killing ground of the arena and made himself impossible to ignore in the process, which means the fights are only going to keep coming at him one after another from this point forward. On top of that, he notes that unlike the bodyguard the boy faced before, there are plenty of fighters spread throughout the mid-level arenas who are more than capable of reading and reacting to his speed without getting caught off guard by it. Hongseal then thinks through the implications of what Bar is saying and asks him whether sending the boy somewhere better would essentially just be the same as letting him walk free. Meanwhile, in a completely different part of the grounds, the slave from before finds a moment to talk to the boy and fills him in on just how massive the arena world around them really is, explaining that there are hundreds of arenas operating in this region alone and that because of that people have taken to calling the whole area the Arena Province. After that, some of the guards drag the prisoner out of the area, while a chief who has just finished putting together a meal for everyone brings it out to serve. The chief thinks to herself that even something as straightforward as making a single wok of fried rice becomes a whole production when you are surrounded by nothing but grown men all day long. She then glances around the space and spots the group of slaves that came in just yesterday, and right away she figures that they are about to use discipline as a convenient excuse to go ahead and bully them all over again like they always do. Then something catches her eye and stops her thoughts in their tracks, as she notices the young boy standing there among them and finds herself wondering what exactly he is doing in a place like this. The young boy meanwhile is taking in his surroundings and looks up above him, quickly realizing that the ceiling is completely blocked off and sealed up with no way through. He then starts quietly wondering to himself whether this whole place is supposed to be some kind of training yard. Right at that moment, another guy makes his entrance into the space, and the guard standing nearby tells him that he went ahead and gathered all the slaves together specifically to introduce them to him. The guy takes one sweeping look around at all of them and immediately bursts out laughing, making it pretty clear from his reaction that every single person standing in front of him looks weak and completely flimsy to him. He then starts walking along and looking each of them over before addressing the whole group, telling them straight up that every last one of them is seriously unlucky for having ended up as slaves in a mid-tier arena of all the places they could have landed. Hearing that, one of the slaves thinks that he is right because even low-tier arenas are packed with people who can fight, so they don't even need to mention mid-tier ones. Another guard then introduces the new guy as Jusang, and says that with just one more win, he will stop being a fight slave and become a true arena fighter. Jusang says that they can talk about that later, for now he wants to hear the name of slaves and where they are from. Everyone then introduces themselves, including the slave who knows different language. His name is Nadong, and after his parents died, he left his hometown and got tricked. When it comes to the young boy's turn to speak, he stays completely silent and does not say a word, so Nadong turns to Jusang and explains that the boy only knows Goryeo and cannot communicate in any other language. Nadong then switches over and starts talking to the boy directly in Goryeo, telling him that he needs to go ahead and give his name and explain how he ended up in this place. The boy, however, makes it clear that while he is willing to share his name, he is not comfortable doing it in front of all of them and does not want everyone present to hear what he has to say. He also calls out what is happening around them, saying that this whole setup is not any kind of real training and that they are just gathering everyone together as a way of intimidating and scaring them into compliance. Nadong is genuinely caught off guard by that response and stands there for a moment thinking that there is absolutely no way he can just turn around and repeat any of that out loud to the others. So instead, Nadong turns back to Jusang and tells him that the boy said he only just woke up recently and that he has not been able to remember his own name yet. That explanation does not go over well at all, and Jusang immediately gets furious and responds by slapping Nadong hard across the face. Around the same time all of this is going on, Bar is up in his room and picks up on the sounds of the commotion happening below, and the chief walks over and tells him that he should head down and go take a look at what is going on for himself. Meanwhile, Jusang keeps right on hitting Nadong without letting up, and that is the moment the young boy decides he has seen enough and charges straight at Jusang, launching into him and hitting him back repeatedly. Jusang manages to block every single one of the incoming hits and then drives a clean and solid punch right into the boy that stops him in his tracks. After that lands, laughter breaks out across the room, and Jusang brings up the fact that he had heard this kid was supposed to have some kind of impressive light footwork to show off. The young boy thinks that this guy is definitely strong, because even blocking that, his arm looks all bruised up. Jusang then again kicks him, saying once his breathing is disrupted, he will finish him before he recovers. He continues to kick the young boy around and tells everyone that people who use QI techniques, the strategy changes depending on the type, but the basics are all the same. He also says that if they land hits or wear down their stamina, they are no different from any normal opponent. He also tells them that it's not as easy as it sounds, but if they at least know they can be taken down, they won't lose so easily. Just then, Bar arrives and wonders if everything is over by now. He also thinks that Jusang is arrogant, but he is not completely wrong. He thinks that light footwork is actually the easiest QI technique to counter, and even in that match earlier, he only landed that surprise attack because the opponent didn't see the light footwork coming. So, just being able to use light footwork is impressive, but if he can't learn any other chi techniques, getting stronger will be hard. Later, the vice owner calls the massive build bald guy and punches him in the face. He asks him how they dare lay hands on something he personally came to claim. The bald guy apologizes to him saying he didn't know that guy was so important to him. The vice owner says that there is no way a trash like him could recognize that talent, but even if he doesn't live up to all his expectations, he's still guaranteed money in this arena. Meanwhile, Jusang says that that's enough for lesson now, and it's time to show what happens when they jump a kid without fear. The then orders others to drag the young boy here since he's so arrogant with his light footwork, they should at least smash his legs. Seeing that, Bar wonders if he has been too soft on them lately, as they are starting to treat the arena's property like their own. The young boy pushes himself back up onto his feet once again, and Jusang looks at him and comments that they had been deliberately holding back enough to make sure they did not actually kill him, but that this kid is clearly built tougher than most. All of the other slaves around him start frantically trying to get through to the young boy and tell him not to go charging in again because if he does he is going to end up losing a whole lot more than just a leg this time around. The story then dips back into a flashback where the young boy is in the middle of a training session with his older brother and asks him whether they really have to put themselves through something this intense and brutal just to train chi techniques. His brother then takes the time to explain what makes their father's martial arts so unique and special compared to everything else and lays out exactly why the kind of training they are doing today is absolutely necessary for what they are trying to develop. It is also during this moment that the young boy's name is revealed, and his name is Quan. His brother goes on to explain that Qi is an entirely different kind of power that works by amplifying and boosting a person's natural strength from within, and that every single person walking around has it inside them, but the reality is that most people go their entire lives without ever being able to access or use it. Even among the smaller group of people who can tap into it, the level of strength it produces varies significantly from one person to the next. He also explains that martial arts systems built around controlling and directing Qi are referred to as Qi techniques, and that most of these systems work by stirring and building up Qi through very deliberate and controlled patterns of breathing. Snapping back to the present, Quan makes a decision in that moment and reaches back into everything his brother taught him, calling on the Jingak technique and putting it into motion, which immediately sends a visible wave of shock through everyone watching who had absolutely no idea what they were about to see. After making his decision, Quan launches himself straight at Jusang, and the moment he does, Jusang's expression shifts into one of pure shock as he realizes that this boy is actually pulling off light footwork at that level without any hesitation. Quan then follows through and manages to catch Jusang right in one of his eyes, damaging it, before driving a sharp and direct punch straight into his neck that takes a serious toll on him. Quan then follows all of that up by landing a hard kick right into Jusang's face to pile on even more damage, and then grabs him and slams him down onto the ground with everything he has. One of the other guards steps in at that point and drives a kick into Quan to try and force him to stop, and then calls out to the rest of the group, telling all of them that they need to stop holding back and just rush Quan all at once, making it clear that Quan is a killer and that he is not going to let any of them off easy if they give him the chance. Seeing that, Bar finds himself completely thrown off because in all his years he has never once seen anyone manage to use a Qi technique while in the kind of physical condition Quan is currently in, and he genuinely cannot wrap his head around how the boy is still pulling off light footwork on top of everything else. He also thinks back to the earlier match and recalls that Quan had used Jingak first before transitioning into the light footwork, and at the time that sequence had struck him as strange and out of place in a way he could not quite pin down. Now standing here watching it happen again, Bar arrives at the conclusion that Quan's level of talent is something that sits completely beyond anything he currently has the ability to measure or fully understand. Just then, Hongseal shows up and tells Bar to open the door. When Bar and Hongseal enters the ground, everyone is surprised to see them. Hongseal can already guess what's going on, and tells the others that if they are doing this kind of things during mealtime, then they need good amount of beating. Hongseal then approaches Quan saying he needs some breaking in. She then attacks him using her sword, but he dodges it quickly. Bar stands there and thinks through what he is observing, and it hits him that Hongseal has never once in the past shown any kind of personal interest or involvement in the internal conflicts and fights that break out between the arena slaves, so the fact that she is now stepping in and personally handling the punishment of a kid who is not even fully at fault for what happened reads very clearly to him as a warning being sent to everyone watching. On top of that, he also thinks about how even after he gave her a pretty negative evaluation of the boy, she is still clearly holding on to some kind of expectation for what Quan might be capable of down the road. After taking the beating that has been coming at him from all sides, Quan finally hits his limit and drops to the ground completely unconscious, and Hongseal wastes no time turning to Bar and telling him to go ahead and call for a physician to come and take a look at the boy. Across the way at the same time, the chief finally lets out a long breath of relief now that she has actually gone ahead and spoken to Hongseal about the whole situation, and even though Quan ended up getting beaten up pretty badly in the process, she takes some comfort in knowing that something like this is not going to be allowed to happen again going forward. Sometime later, Nadong finally comes back to consciousness and opens his eyes to find himself wrapped up in bandages from head to toe, and notices right away that whatever he is lying on feels surprisingly soft beneath him. He then pulls his gaze around the room and the shock hits him instantly when he realizes that Hongseal herself is sitting right there in the same space as him. Nadong then snaps his head away as fast as he possibly can the moment he realizes that Hongseal is actually in the middle of changing her dress right there in the same room. The maid standing nearby points out that she had told Hongseal to go somewhere else to get changed just in case he happened to wake up while she was doing it, but Hongseal brushes the whole thing off and says plainly that she could not care less whether someone like him catches a glimpse of that. Nadong then shifts his attention and notices that Quan is sitting right there beside him, and asks him in a confused and groggy voice where exactly they are and how they ended up here. Quan fills him in and explains that the lady had brought in a doctor and made sure that both of them got properly treated and taken care of. That information hits Nadong in a way he clearly was not expecting, and he sits there struggling to wrap his head around the idea that there is actually someone operating within this arena who has the freedom and the authority to just go ahead and get arena slaves treated like that whenever she sees fit. It also starts coming back to him that on the very first day they were brought to this place, Everyone around them had been greeting her as the owner of the whole operation. Na-dong then turns toward Hong-sil and immediately starts apologizing and asking for her forgiveness as fast as the words can come out of his mouth, but Hong-sil simply tells him to stop talking and be quiet. As she looks over at Kwon, however, something catches her attention and gives her pause, which is the fact that Kwon is not trembling or cowering in front of her the way every other arena slave she has ever encountered would be in this situation. She also finds herself thinking back and recalling that even while he was in the middle of taking a serious beating, he never once flinched or showed any visible sign of fear throughout the whole thing. Hong-sil then asks for his name, so Na-dong quickly whispers to him that she is asking for his name and asks if he can just make one up. Since Kwon tells him to make it up, he tells her that his name is Byong. Na-dong thinks that that was the name that popped into his head the first time he saw him, and the way he moved, like a flying shadow. Byong then asks him who is that ill-tempered woman over there, and Na-dong gets freaked out to hear that. He tells him that he can't just that like that and he might get killed around here for having the wrong look on his face when he talks. Surprisingly, Hong-sil knows the language and tells him that the ill-tempered woman is Hong-sil, the owner of this arena. Na-dong then asks for forgiveness, and says that Kwon doesn't like saying his name, so he just made one up for him. Hong-sil tells him to calm down and stop making so much noise and makes it clear that she does not go around making judgments based on small and insignificant things, and that what she actually judges is only what she can directly see and observe for herself. She also tells him that if he likes the name he has been going by, then that is perfectly fine and there is nothing more to say about it. Hong-sil then announces that she is going to call him Byong from this point forward and tells him to get up and come along with her. Earlier, Bar had sat down with her and told her that Byong is not just someone with a large capacity but that his vessel itself is on an entirely different level compared to anyone else. Bar had gone further and explained that the reason he had struggled to give a proper evaluation of him was because a talent like his was simply something he had never even thought to imagine could exist, and that if Byong continues to grow and develop from where he currently stands, he could end up becoming a top-tier master the likes of which nobody has ever seen before. Snapping back to the present, Hong-sil takes him out to a market, and as she walks she thinks to herself that before they even begin thinking about training him the right way, there is something far more important that needs to be established first, and that thing is loyalty and trust. Right at that moment, the arena owner himself, whose name is Hogwang, shows up out of nowhere and immediately starts mocking Hong-sil, making a dig about how she has apparently taken up babysitting as a new hobby. He also makes it clear that the two of them both know perfectly well that slave arena fights are nothing more than a business at the end of the day, and that if she is genuinely serious about moving up and competing at a top-tier arena level, she is going to need real and serious talent to make that happen. He then steps aside and introduces his own slave, whose name is Jayong, someone he says he went out and personally scouted himself. Jayong takes one look at Byong and says that he looks so completely weak and underwhelming that if he does not turn around and run away right now, he could end his life right here on the spot with a single blow. Byong's response to all of that is not exactly what anyone was expecting, as he simply starts yawning and casually mentions that sitting around listening to people chatter away in some language he does not understand has a way of making him feel incredibly sleepy. Hong-sil then turns to the other guy and smoothly explains that this kid is not really one for long conversations and follows that up by saying that the two of them need to get moving because they are already running behind schedule. Jayong then leans over to the guy and asks whether he wants him to just go ahead and take the kid out right here and now, but the guy tells him to hold off and wait, explaining that people are going to start paying closer attention to and watching out for Byong's chi technique now that they have seen what he can do, so for the time being Jayong should put all of his energy into his own training and development. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Hong-sil picks out some really good and tasty food and buys it for Byong, thinking to herself as she does that for kids, whoever feeds them something delicious automatically starts to feel like a trustworthy and good person in their eyes, and if Byong starts seeing her that way, then earning his trust is going to come naturally from there. When Byong sees the food in front of him, something in him shifts and his mind gets pulled back into the past to a memory of his brother giving him the exact same kind of thing back when they were still together. He thinks about how much younger he was during those days and how he had absolutely no real understanding at the time of just how hard his brother was working and sacrificing to make those small moments possible for him. Then as the two of them are walking along, Byong quietly spots a homeless kid on the side of the road, and without making any kind of big deal out of it, he walks over and hands the food over to the child instead of keeping it for himself. Hong-sil asks him why he is not eating it when she went out of her way to buy that, as once he goes back to the arena, he won't be able to eat treats like this. Byong says that he doesn't deserve stuff like that and just need whatever food keeps his body in shape to fight. Hong-sil then takes him to a restaurant and tells him to at least eat his meal, as he himself said that he needs to eat if he is going to keep fighting. Byung settles in and starts eating, and while he does, Hongseal takes the opportunity to ask him something that has clearly been on her mind, which is how it is that he never once tried to make a run for it even during the moments when he clearly had the chance to do so. Byung looks at her and asks her straight up why he would ever want to run away in the first place, and she responds by pointing out that if he goes back to the arena he is going to be thrown into fight after fight where death is always a very real possibility waiting for him. Byung takes that in and tells her simply that the only reason he is staying and not going anywhere is because fighting is exactly what he came here to do, which clearly catches Hongseal completely off guard. He then goes further and explains that his plan is to become the strongest person in this entire place, and once he has done that he will walk out on his own terms, and nothing about that plan involves running. Hearing that, Hongseal finds a genuine smile spreading across her face as she thinks to herself that she is starting to like this kid increasingly with every passing moment. She then reaches over and helps him out by scooping more food onto his spoon, and that small gesture unexpectedly triggers something deep inside Byung as it reminds him of his brother doing something just like that for him back in another time. The memory hits him harder than he expects and tears start quietly forming in his eyes, and Hongseal notices and finds herself wondering whether his thoughts have drifted back to his family. She then thinks through the situation and realizes that if she moves in and offers him comfort right at this moment, it could soften something in him and push him toward following her lead more willingly. She reaches out and gently pats him on the head, but Byung does not lean into it and instead tells her not to do that. Several years pass, and the scene jumps forward to the arena where a guard comes to find Byung and tells him that it is time for him to go out and fight. Byung, who is now visibly stronger than he has ever been before, simply looks up and says that he is ready. The guard then turns to him and asks why he bothers going through all of that every single day without fail and tells him that at the very minimum he should at least be saving his energy and strength for the actual matches that matter. Byung simply replies that what he just did was nothing more than a warm-up to get himself loose before the real fight gets underway. The guard does not let it go and starts up with the mocking again, so Byung does not waste any time and tells him straight to his face that he is so far above him in terms of strength that he could put him on the ground and knock him out in a single shot without breaking a sweat. On his way out to the arena, Byung comes across a group of the other slaves who let him know that they have all come out to watch his match and cheer him on. They also open up a little and admit that while they have managed to stay alive up to this point, the reality of their situation is that any given day could be their last and there is nothing they can do to guarantee otherwise. Byung listens and then tells them plainly that whoever he is being put up against today is not something they need to spend any energy worrying about because he is going to handle it, and that their focus should be on looking out for themselves instead. Nadong stands there listening to all of this and thinks quietly to himself that they all already know deep down just how far above them Byung really is in terms of ability, even without him ever having to say it out loud. But at the end of the day, no matter how strong he gets or how many fights he wins, to all of them he is still just that same kid they first crossed paths with when everything started, and because of that they are always going to worry about him no matter what he says. On the other hand, Hongseal tells someone to cancel the match, but the guy says that they have already turned down Byung's fight so many times that Theater Arena's reputation has taken a big hit. The official then says that they accepted a match request from a noble already and if they cancel now, the losses will be huge. However, Hongseal says that she will bear the loss as he has to cancel it. She also mentions that the official seems like crossing the line lately, but he replies that he is saying this because he cares and he knows she still expects great things from Byung's talent. He also says that all he has till this day is just light footwork and his cutting technique and movement are superb, but that alone won't let him touch top arena fighters. Byung's match starts off with a real arena fighter named Gwaku who used to be pretty famous, then disappeared. The crowd gets hit with a wave of shock when they realize that the person standing across from Gwaku is none other than Byung, someone who as far as most people know can only really use light footwork and not much else beyond that. Gwaku stands there and finds himself wondering why the noble even wanted to set up a match like this in the first place and then reminds himself that the noble has never really been someone who is easy to read or figure out. Right from the very first moment the match starts, Byung does not hesitate and charges straight at Gwaku with his knife already in hand, and the speed of that opening move catches Gwaku completely off guard as he finds himself wondering what on earth is wrong with how fast this kid is moving. Gwaku then decides to stop holding anything back and charges right back at Byung with full force and manages to connect with a hit that lands solidly. Byung takes the impact and immediately registers just how fast and how strong this guy really is, and the force behind that single punch is enough to leave one of his bones broken. Everyone watching comes to the same conclusion pretty quickly, figuring that with an injury like that there is no way Byung is going to be able to keep using his light footwork, and that the match is essentially already over. Bar watches from his spot and thinks through what just happened, Noting that the raw force needed to swing a steel club combined with the speed Gwaku is showing with his footwork makes it clear that Byong's opponent is simply above him in every single category there is. Byong himself takes all of this in and thinks that this right here is what a real arena fighter looks like, and with that realization settling in he gets himself ready to truly begin the match. Gwaku on the other hand is starting to pick up on something that is throwing him off, as he thinks to himself that Byong's reactions are so sharp that he is somehow managing to block absolutely everything that is being thrown at him. A guy sitting in the crowd with a noticeable scar across his face watches the match closely and thinks to himself that being able to keep a chi technique going even with broken breathing does sound impressive on the surface, but once a person actually understands the trick behind how it works, it stops being anything particularly special or remarkable. Byong then makes his move and goes for a strike on his opponent, but Gwaku reads it and gets out of the way without much trouble at all. Bar watches that exchange and thinks through what it means, noting that under normal circumstances when someone is visibly hurt and dealing with an injury, most fighters automatically assume that the injured person is no longer capable of using chi techniques anymore, and that assumption is exactly why they keep getting caught off guard and struggling to avoid Byong's sudden attacks when they come out of nowhere. The fact that Gwaku dodged it like it was nothing however tells a completely different story about what kind of fighter he is dealing with. The opponent then finds his opening and drives his massive weapon into Byong with serious force, catching him completely off guard and leaving him reeling. Byong processes what just happened and figures that the only reason he managed to push him away in that moment was because Gwaku had gotten too close to generate a full swing with his club, but even with that working in his favor the damage is real and his back feels like it has been completely shattered from the impact. The opponent then follows up by driving a kick straight into Byong that sends him flying across the arena and crashing hard into the wall. Gwaku thinks to himself afterward that he barely felt any real resistance on impact, and that the only thing worth acknowledging is that Byong managed to jump back in that split second before the full force connected, which at least shows that his reaction speed is genuinely good. In the meantime, Bar wonders if the opponent understands Byong's martial arts or not, but he's an experienced fighter. He also thinks that he keeps his distance so there's no opening for a surprise attack, and breaks his opponent down with clean, solid blows. The other official says that he was expecting Byong to put on a real show, but this is disappointing. The other guy watching from the side decides to weigh in and tells Byong that they had all expected a great deal from him when they first saw how young he was and already using light footwork, but that he never actually grew beyond that starting point and developed further, and that at the end of the day he is nothing more than a slave who happens to know light footwork and nothing else worth mentioning. Gwaku meanwhile thinks to himself that while Byong's movement has genuinely been good throughout the fight, the hard reality is that unless someone dodges with absolute perfection every single time, there is simply no way their body comes through something like this without taking serious damage. Then something shifts inside Byong as the memory of his older brother's death suddenly surges up from somewhere deep inside him and ignites a fire that had not been there a moment before. The story then slips back into a flashback where Byong and his older brother are spending time together out in the forest, and his brother tells him that being able to keep a chi technique functioning properly even when the body is exhausted or hurt is something that only true masters are capable of pulling off. His older brother then makes a decision in that moment to share something with him that carries even more weight than anything else he had planned to pass on, something he had originally intended to hold back until Byong was older and ready for it. Snapping back to the present, Byong pushes his broken body into motion and dodges his opponent's incoming strike, and while the move works, he still ends up taking damage as his arm gets cut in the process. But without letting even that slow him down, Byong drives his blade straight into the opponent's neck in one sharp and decisive motion. The entire crowd erupts in disbelief at what they just witnessed, with everyone asking out loud how someone who looked like they were seconds away from collapsing suddenly found a way to move faster than ever. Nobody can wrap their head around the fact that a fight slave just walked out of a match against a trained arena fighter and came out on top. It turns out, Byong's brother told him that their father's martial arts let him use chi even when he is exhausted or his breathing is broken, so he can push out power beyond what his chi technique could allow. However, he tells Byong not to use that or else he could die. Byong then walks towards his cell, thinking that he is going to get even more stronger. Watching everything that just unfolded, Bar finds himself with a question he cannot shake, and that is whether what just happened was simply some kind of sudden power surge that only kicks in during moments of extreme crisis, and if that is not the case then why Byong has never once shown a chi technique operating at that level during any of his previous fights until right now. He also thinks about the fact that Byong has never been someone who opens up and talks about himself or his background, and that up until this moment Bar had never really felt the need to push and ask, but now for the first time he finds himself genuinely curious about the martial arts Byong has been trained in and who exactly the person behind that training was. As it turns out, Qi techniques as a whole are generally broken down and categorized into three distinct types, which are light body techniques, power boosting techniques, and explosive Qi techniques. Light body techniques work by using Qi to speed up the rate at which the muscles contract and release during repeated movement, and because of that they can be applied to continuous motion in a way that typically makes explosive running significantly faster than it would be otherwise. When someone reaches the master level with this type of technique, the increased speed of the muscles also starts generating a noticeable boost in raw power as a secondary effect, and it also extends the distance and height of their jumps in a way that would not be possible without it. Power boosting techniques on the other hand work differently by directing Qi specifically into concentrated muscle groups, which results in a significant increase in the person's ability to lift heavy things and maintain a crushing grip strength that goes well beyond what the body could produce on its own. In the same way that light body techniques are built for sustaining speed across continuous movement, a master of power boosting techniques is actually capable of pulling off a single explosive jump that goes faster and farther than even a master of light body techniques could manage in that same one-time burst. Bar then turns his attention back to what he just witnessed and thinks about how what Byong is showing right now with his light body technique is not simply faster than what his opponent can keep up with, but that the speed he is reaching is something that by all rights should only be achievable by someone who has mastered power boosting techniques, which makes what Byong is doing even harder to explain or categorize. Hongseal then cuts through Bar's thoughts by telling him to go and get the physician over to Byong right away since he needs to be back on his feet and ready to go as soon as possible. Bar however finds his mind drifting as he thinks about how Hongseal must have picked up on exactly what he did when it comes to Byong's light body technique, and he finds himself wondering whether she is going to go ahead and place another bet on that talent of his and commit to training him properly this time around. Meanwhile, another arena fighter by the name of Yuan makes his way over to Byong and tells him straight up that he had been hearing rumors going around about a fight slave who was supposedly able to use light body techniques, but that he honestly never expected the reality of it to be anywhere near as impressive as what he just saw with his own eyes. He also says that if he beat him, he can become an arena fighter here on the spot and asks if he wants to give it a try. Byong just walks by him saying if he moves to another arena he might think about it. Later, Byong gets checked up by a physician who tells him not to move too much for a while, or else the bone won't set properly. Hongseal then arrives and hits Byong in the head out of nowhere, saying if he is going to train by jumping into life or death matches, he might as well say he want to die. Just then, a granny shows up who is the arena overseer and says that they should bury Byong here and end it. After that, Bar arrives and informs Hongseal that the vice owner forced another reckless match. As it turns out, the other slaves find themselves going up against a mysterious guy whose face is partially hidden and carries a noticeable scar across it. One of the slaves thinks to himself that if this person is an actual arena fighter then he is going to be dealing with someone on a seriously dangerous level of strength. The mysterious guy then reaches up and pulls off his mask and hat, revealing his face, and makes it clear that he is going to come back and kill everyone connected to this arena sooner or later, and that for today he is willing to settle for what he has already done. Nadong takes one look at the exposed face and something clicks immediately as he recognizes the guy as the exact same person who had attacked him before, and even though the scars scattered across his face make him look different enough to cause some initial confusion, Nadong is certain without any doubt that he is looking at Jusang. Meanwhile, Hongseal pulls Bar aside and asks him whether the vice owner is still in the middle of meeting with the Lord at this moment, and Bar confirms that the match currently taking place is also being fought against one of the Lord's own fighters. Byong then makes the decision that he is going to get involved in the fight as well and starts moving, but the chief steps in and tells him firmly that he needs to stay put and rest his body instead of pushing it further. Byong does not pay any attention to that and keeps going anyway, completely ignoring what she said. The granny gets even more heated about it and says out loud that he is getting colder and more distant with every passing day, and that no matter how well they treat him or how much care they put into looking after him, he never once shows any appreciation for any of it. The granny then says that if he were only cold, she wouldn't give a damn, but the problem is, when he first came in, she ended up watching him with her. She also says that he was strange from the start, and one day, he gave his own blanket to someone who was sick, and another day, he gave his meal to someone who'd grown weak. She also brings up the fact that whenever he comes across someone bullying or picking on those who are weaker and cannot defend themselves, he does not think twice about it and knocks the offender away without any hesitation whatsoever. She then adds that she has seen a whole lot of different things and all kinds of people throughout her life, but that he is genuinely the only person who has ever managed to shock her the way he does. The granny also points out that in a place where simply keeping yourself alive from one day to the next is already a hard enough challenge on its own, she has never once in all her time there seen anyone actually take it upon themselves to look out for others the way he consistently does, and that is something she has never forgotten. Back down on the ground, one of the slaves tries to reach out to Jusang and asks him how he has been doing all this time and then tells him that they really need to go ahead and bring the match to a stop before things get any worse. Jusang does not respond to any of that and simply reaches down and straps on his knuckle bar without saying a word, making it perfectly clear that stopping this fight is the last thing on his mind. He then launches himself straight at one of the slaves and connects with a hit that sends the guy crashing hard to the ground with serious force. Another slave steps forward and demands to know why Jusang is trying to turn this into a real and full-blown fight that none of them are going to be able to walk away from in one piece. Rather than giving any kind of answer or explanation, Jusang just charges directly at him and swings a punch without hesitating. In that same moment, one of the more massively built slaves decides to step in and goes for an attack on Jusang, but Jusang catches him with one hand, stops him completely in his tracks, and sends him flying without breaking a sweat. At that moment, Byong arrives and gets shocked thinking that there is no way the slaves can beat someone like him. After everything that just went down, the crowd buzzes with the collective realization that if Jusang is an arena fighter who has mastered power-boosting chi, then 5 fight slaves standing against him amounts to absolutely nothing and the outcome was never really in question. One of the slaves stands there thinking about how Jusang was already dangerously strong before any of this, and now on top of that raw strength he has gone and added power-boosting chi to his arsenal, which makes him an entirely different and far more terrifying threat than he ever was before. Byong stares at him and thinks to himself that this is without a doubt the same guy he went up against back in that earlier fight, and that he is completely certain that Jusang had not been able to use any kind of chi at all during that encounter. That realization then turns into something that eats at Byong from the inside, as he gets furious with himself for having stayed stuck at the same level while Jusang somehow went out and managed to master power-boosting chi within just a few years of time. The vice owner watches the whole situation unfold from where he is standing and his thoughts drift back to the time when Jusang had caused a serious problem at the arena, recalling that since he had been right on the edge of earning his freedom at that point they had decided to let him walk away without any real punishment. Since he left with absolutely nothing to his name, the vice owner figures he probably never got access to any kind of proper treatment or care for his injuries during that time. At that moment, Hong Seal comes walking in and does not waste a single second before reaching out and slapping the vice owner hard across the face, demanding to know what exactly he thinks he is doing when she had already made it crystal clear to him that crossing the line was not something she was going to tolerate. The vice owner asks her if he not have this much of authority and says that she may have founded this arena, but he invested a lot of connections and money into it. He also says that if she is throwing a fit over something this small, he can't help but wonder what she will do if he really crosses the line. Bar then shows up and says that he don't know much about arena rights or politics, but his disrespect towards the owner ends here. Yuan then steps forward and say that fighters should be fighting fighters and tells vice owner to step back. Yuan then tells Bar to call on him anytime he need as he will fight him even without pay. Bar speaks up and says that he has been away from the arena scene for long enough that people have apparently started feeling comfortable enough to look down on him without any hesitation. One of the officials standing nearby takes notice of Bar and thinks back to what he knows about him, recalling that Bar was an arena fighter who somehow ended up stuck competing at a mid-tier level, but that the rumors going around about him suggest that his actual ability puts him on the same level as the fighters operating at the very top tier of the game. What happens next catches everyone off guard as the fight continues and Jusang starts absolutely brutalizing the slaves one after another with the knuckle bar still strapped onto his hand, tossing people around like they weigh absolutely nothing and leaving everyone watching completely stunned by the level of force he is throwing around so casually. Byong watches and thinks to himself that because of the club Jusang is carrying he has not been able to land a clean and decisive hit on him, but if things keep going the direction they are heading then something is going to have to change fast. Byong then raises his voice and tells Jusang directly to drop what he is doing with the slaves and come fight him instead, but Jusang just looks over at him and says that judging by the reaction he is getting from Byong right now, this whole situation sounds like it is only going to get a whole lot more entertaining once he finishes off every last one of them first. Jusang then turns and walks deliberately over to one of the slaves, reaches down, and wraps his hand around the slave's neck. Watching the situation spiral further out of control, Byong starts to panic inside and thinks to himself that he has to find a way to do something about this right now because no matter what anyone says to Jusang, he is simply not going to stop on his own. Flashing back to the night before, Nadong is sitting there repeatedly banging his head against the wall while the others watch him and try to figure out why he is putting himself through that without having eaten anything either. One of them points out that tomorrow is going to be the first time Nadong has ever had to go into a fight completely on his own without anyone beside him. Byong, who is in the middle of his own training nearby, weighs in and says that if Nadong has that kind of time and energy to spare, he should be using every bit of it to think seriously about how he is going to approach the fight instead of wasting it on worrying. Nadong fires back and tells him that it is easy for someone like him to say something like that because he is strong, and that people who are weak do not have the luxury of just switching off the worry the way he makes it sound. Byong pushes back and says that this is actually the exact reason why he thinks harder than anyone else about how to fight, and he tells Nadong straight that if all he does is sit around worrying about how strong his opponent is, then he is already as good as dead and he would be far better off spending that energy trying to figure out at least one way to catch his opponent off guard with an ambush. Nadong asks him how a person is even supposed to go about finding that kind of approach when they are in that position, and Byong admits honestly that even he does not have a clear answer to that. He then tells them to work it out themselves, pointing out that between all of them they know a wide variety of different things and that they are smart enough to figure something out if they actually put their heads together and try. He also says that a good technique or weapon for surprise attacks, if their ambush works once, they win. Back in present, Jusang is holding on to Nadong's neck, who thinks that for an ambush, hidden weapons would be best, but hidden weapons are banned. So, one of the ideas he came up with was this, that if the weapon is out in the open but hard to notice, then he is not breaking the rules. Using a blade on Nadong's foot, he hits Jusang, who gets injured and drops Nadong. Jusang wonders how he had a blade in his shoe, and Byong thinks that it was a weapon that's visible but hard to spot, and Nadong landed a perfect hit. He also thinks that now Jusang can't properly use power boosting chi and they have a chance to win. Jusang then moves to go after another slave, but before he can get there one of the slaves releases an arrow that flies straight into his kidney and stops him in his tracks. The story then dips back into a flashback where Bar had sat all the slaves down and told them that starting from the absolute basics would normally be the ideal approach, but that the reality of their situation means they simply do not have that kind of time available to them. He had gone on to explain that if they want to build themselves up and get stronger within a short window, the smartest thing they can do is take whatever they are already good at and find a way to adapt and apply it directly to real fight situations. Bar then went around and asked each of them one by one to tell him what they were good at, and the slaves went through and shared their individual strengths with him. One of them hesitated and said that he was not particularly skilled at anything especially impressive, but that he was decent at slinging stones and that he could even hit birds out of the air with a fair amount of consistency. Bar had thought about that for a moment and told him that it was actually a genuinely useful skill to have, but then pointed out that throwing knives, hidden weapons, and arrows are all strictly banned inside the arena, which meant he would not be able to use that ability directly. Back in the present, that same slave thinks to himself that nobody ever believed that skill of his amounted to anything worth paying attention to, but that is exactly the reason he had made the choice to fight with a spear, because it still allowed him to throw with the same instinct and precision he had always had. After that, another one of the slaves pushes forward and charges straight at Jusang with a sword drawn and manages to land a clean slash across him that does real damage. With that decisive strike landing, the fight slaves pull off the win and the crowd absolutely erupts into cheers for them. Taking in what just happened, Byong can barely believe that they actually pulled off the win and finds himself thinking that every single one of them genuinely did a remarkable job out there. He then turns his attention inward for a moment and thinks about how he felt something different stirring inside him a little while ago during the fight, something he has not quite been able to put his finger on yet. Meanwhile, Bar turns to Hong Seal and tells her that each one of them stepped up and did exactly the part that needed to be done when it counted. The vice owner tries to brush the whole thing off by saying that Jusang is simply an idiot who let his guard drop way too much and that is the only reason things ended the way they did. Hong Seal then turns to the vice owner and tells him that thanks to him and everything he set in motion, they all got treated to a pretty entertaining match, so she supposes she should thank him for that. She also makes it clear that she is satisfied with how everything wrapped up, and since their guest is still present, she says they should go ahead and call it a day and leave things where they stand. Before she turns to walk away though, she stops and leaves the vice owner with one final thing to think about, telling him plainly that if he has no intention of actually listening to what she says and respecting the boundaries she has set, then he should pack up all of his fighters and slaves and get out of her arena entirely. Bar also takes a moment to address the fighter standing there and tells him that if the day ever comes where he walks out of this arena for good, he should look Bar up because he will be more than happy to give him all the fights he could ever want. The official then tells vice owner that he held back well, and for now he should stay low. Back in the cage, all the slaves receive their treatment and finds Byong sleeping. They talk about how he doesn't care if his comrades live or get hurt and he is just a cold-hearted kid who doesn't care about anything. Nadong says that they all know if something bad happened to them, Byong would do something, no matter what. In a flashback, Byong asks his brother why it is that they never pick up and use weapons during their training. He also brings up the point that if they went ahead and started training with weapons, getting stronger would probably come a whole lot more easily and quickly for both of them. His brother responds by explaining that their father's martial arts simply do not incorporate weapons as part of the system, and just as he is about to reveal something that sounds like it carries real weight and importance behind it, Byong suddenly snaps awake and the moment is gone before he can hear the rest. Byong immediately turns his frustration toward Nadong for waking him up, and Nadong tells him to stop wasting time being annoyed because Bar has been looking all over for him and he needs to get moving right away. Despite that, what is really eating at Byong as he gets up is the fact that he cannot remember what his brother was about to tell him, and the feeling that whatever it was carried some kind of real significance keeps nagging at him. Byong then makes his way over and meets up with Bar, who brings him to a specific spot and explains that what they are about to do here is also a form of training in its own right, because watching truly strong people go up against each other and feeling something from that experience has the potential to awaken something inside a person that normal training simply cannot reach. It turns out that the fight they are there to watch involves none other than Jaeyoung, who is squaring off against another arena fighter, and Bar tells Byong to keep his eyes locked on Jaeyoung the entire time because even though he comes from a mid-tier arena background, the level he actually fights at belongs firmly in the top-tier conversation. Jaeyoung's opponent takes one look at the situation and decides to open things up by mocking them, saying that Jaeyoung looks like nothing more than a kid standing across from him. Jaeyoung finds himself thinking that he might have actually crossed paths with or seen Jaeyoung somewhere before, but he quickly pushes that thought aside and tells himself that it does not matter either way and that nobody cares whether he has seen him before or not. What he does acknowledge though is that if Bar is watching to see how he reacts and takes things in, then he should at least make sure he actually pays proper attention to what is happening in front of him. The match then gets underway with fighter Dohak stepping into the ring to go up against Jaeyoung, who has already built up a reputation as something of a genius in the arena world. The visiting arena owner looks around and takes in the whole setup, and thinks to himself that he has traveled to and visited a whole lot of different arenas throughout his time in this business, but that this particular one stands out as genuinely unique in the way it is put together, being one large open single-story space that feels more like a training hall than a traditional arena, and with just the one ring keeping everything simple and straightforward. The visiting arena owner then adds that he finds the seating situation a little lacking when it comes to accommodating guests properly, noting that most people are just standing around with only the elevated platform and a small number of chairs available for anyone to actually sit down. The other arena owner fires back and says that when the fights being put on are good enough, nobody sitting or standing is paying any attention to whether they have a comfortable seat or not, and points out that this guy came all the way from the outskirts of the arena province and is standing there acting like some kind of professional critic. He also makes the point that every single guest who comes through leaves so thoroughly satisfied by the quality of the fights themselves that they simply do not have anything left to complain about when it comes to anything else. Deep down Jong arena owner thinks that he has heard plenty around here about what kind of chi technique this Jaeyoung uses, so that's the reason why he is so confident. The match starts off with Dohak charging at Jaeyoung with his two blades, but Dohak dodges it and tries to block another attack. Dohak gets surprised to see that his arm didn't get cut off. Surprisingly, Dohak's sword breaks on the ground, and he thinks that he heard Jaeyoung used body-hardening chi, but he still can't cut him with his great sword. It turns out, body-hardening chi is the technique that makes the muscles harder by circulating chi. Seeing that, another arena owner also gets surprised thinking that he has never seen body hardening like that before. However, the arena owner thinks to himself that the level of body hardening Jaeyoung is displaying is something that only a handful of the very best fighters operating in the highest ranking arenas have ever been able to achieve, and that there is simply no way someone running a backwater mid-tier arena like this one has ever come across anything like it before in their life. Dohak then makes another attempt and comes at Jaeyoung with a different sword, but that one breaks apart just as easily as the last one did without doing anything meaningful. After that, Jaeyoung drives his bare hand straight into Dohak and stabs through him, and even after the outcome of the fight has been decided and it is clearly over, he keeps right on going and continues attacking Dohak without pulling back at all. Bar then turns to Byong and asks him whether he is starting to see just how much the type of chi a fighter uses matters in a real fight, pointing out that no matter how refined and sharp someone's light footwork gets, they are still going to have a seriously hard time getting the better of someone built and fighting the way Jaeyoung does. He also tells him that watching a genuinely strong opponent in action should serve as a valuable lesson on its own, and that simply knowing what a fighter operating at a higher level looks and feels like and experiencing that pressure firsthand is enough to push someone's growth in ways that regular training cannot always reach. Byong, however, does not respond to any of that and simply turns around and walks away without a word, thinking to himself that he grew up watching his brother fight and train at an extraordinary level every single day, and that what he just saw is honestly not going to come close to lighting any kind of fire under him or motivating him in the way Bar seems to think it should. Few days go by and Byong continues to train even more harder that even surprises the other cellmates. One of the slaves even mentions that he should do that in the training yard, but he keeps doing it whenever he's not sleeping, so it's uncomfortable for them as well. Nadong puts his hand over his mouth saying if he keeps it up, Byong might get really mad. Nadong thinks that something is definitely wrong and how he always felt like he was hiding his anger before, but this is the first time he has seen him bare his fangs alone like that. In a flashback, Byong's brother is training in the forest by breaking trees as if they are piece of cake, and Byong asks him when he will be able to do this too. Byong's brother tells him that he will need to use power-boosting chi and body-hardening chi first. That makes Byong excited. Byong's brother then explains that their father's martial arts can only be learned by someone with the talent to feel both body movement and the flow of chi very precisely, and not just anyone can learn them, but once he passed the first step creating the flow of chi through Jingak, he can use light footwork, power boosting, and body hardening chi. He also says that if he builds a feel for strength by training how he uses its power every day and get used to adding the flow of chi to his movements with light footwork, then all chi techniques becomes possible. Back in present, Byong thinks that he CNA use strength like brother, and he can use light footwork like brother, but he is furious about not being able to use another chi. Right at that moment, Hong Seal shows up and asks Byong straight up whether what he is doing right now is him taking out his frustration or whether it is actual focused training. She also brings up the fact that watching that fight alongside Bar the other day clearly got to him in a way she was not expecting, and says that she genuinely cannot believe that seeing someone that strong was enough to shake him and put fear into him the way it apparently did. Byong looks at her and says once again with complete conviction that he is never going to let anyone beat him, plain and simple. Hong Seal then turns and walks away, and as she does she thinks to herself that she would love nothing more than to give him more time to develop at his own pace, but looking at the way things are shaping up it is becoming increasingly clear that time is not something they have any more of, and that he is going to have to find a way to push himself to the next level on his own without waiting for it to come naturally. Meanwhile, the vice owner pulls aside a fellow associate and asks him whether he got the weapon sorted out the way he had been told to. The fellow man confirms that he made sure weapons only reached the people who are loyal to and following the vice owner, and that everything else was set up to be kept hidden away out of sight. The vice owner then tells him that when he gives the signal later today, everything gets set into motion and they move forward with the plan. That catches the fellow man completely off guard and the shock registers clearly on his face. The vice owner then lays out exactly how things are going to go, telling him that the owner is going to be taken alive while everyone else is simply going to die. At that exact same time, Jiang's owner makes his way over to Hong Seal and informs her that he is there to put forward a challenge with his representative Bar as the target. Hong Seal speaks up and tells him straight that Bar is not operating at a mid-tier arena level at all, and the other guy responds by saying that the same thing applies to their side as well and that they should not be underestimated either. Hong Seal thinks to herself that she already knows full well how impressive Jiang's body-hardening chi really is, but that the other guy is coming in with an awful lot of confidence that she finds a little hard to just take at face value. She then lays out the terms and reminds everyone that one of the fundamental rules of the arena province is that the side being challenged is the one who gets to set the stakes, and she announces that she is going to put up 10 gun of silver on top of whatever the spectators bring in through their own bets. The other arena representative accepts the terms of the match without hesitation, and the energy in the room shifts immediately as everyone around them waits desperately and impatiently for the whole thing to get started. The vice owner then makes his way over to Hong Seal and brings up the fact that he heard a match has been arranged and set up. Hong Seal looks at him and tells him plainly that once the bookkeeping gets wrapped up and settled he will be leaving the arena, and that there is really no reason for him to hang around any longer than that. As it turns out, Jiang's owner has already gotten exactly what he came for out of this single match, and a large part of that is thanks to the vice owner and the role he played in making it happen. He also thinks back and recalls that ever since word reached him that a woman had gone ahead and opened up her own arena and was running it herself, he had wanted to get his hands on it and take it for himself from the very beginning. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Byong makes his way over to where Bar is and tells him that he heard a fight was being set up and that is exactly why he came to find him. Bar then asks him if he is worried about him, but Byung replies that he would have been worried if it was someone else, but now he is not. Bar thinks that he is all prickly again, which shows that he is back to normal. He also mentions that he knows that after seeing that body-hardening chi, he locked himself in training without saying a word for days. Byung says that he didn't feel motivated or shocked by that, but Bar says that if he truly felt nothing after seeing a master of body-hardening chi, that would only mean he has already grown up watching something far beyond that. Bar also says that by the time Byung was still just a little kid, he had already completed most of the foundational development that a warrior needs to go through, which meant there was not a whole lot that Bar himself could actually step in and teach him that he did not already have. He goes on to say that Byung already possessed all the physical ability required for real combat, and that his light footwork was sitting at a remarkably high level even back then. Bar also points out that without ever having anyone formally guide or instruct him in it, Byung's light footwork has climbed all the way to the level of a top-tier master entirely on its own, and that the people out there who only respect and value the raw and visible power of techniques like power boosting and body hardening are simply never going to give that the acknowledgement it deserves. Before he turns to leave, Bar stops and tells Byung directly that he carries a level of talent that nobody else can come close to touching, and that he is completely certain that Byung has everything it takes to go ahead and learn another chi technique on top of what he already has. Byung stands there and thinks to himself that he has learned a great deal from Bar over the time they have spent together, so he genuinely does not know what Bar is going on about or why he is saying all of this now. After that conversation wraps up, Bar and Jaeyoung make their way down to the ground for their match, and Jaeyoung does not bother with any kind of feeling out process and just launches himself straight at Bar the moment things get started. Meanwhile, on a completely different part of the grounds, Yuan tracks down where Byung is and wastes absolutely no time before slamming him hard into the wall, telling him plainly that today is the day he is going to kill him. On the other hand, the slaves get to know that Bar is fighting a match, and wonders if they are allowed to go watch. Nadong says that Bar gave them permission to watch high fights, but he doubts the other overseers will allow it. The slaves then notice one of the other guys charging at them with knife. The bald guy then approaches the kitchen and tells the chief that the owner said to clear away the dishes in the training yard and bring over every blanket they can find. Earlier, the vice owner told him to gather anyone close to the owner in the training yard as much as possible because he wants some people to die in front of Hong Seal before killing everybody else. Jumping back to the fight, Jaeyoung keeps right on coming at Bar with the same sharp and precise movements he had been putting on display during his previous match, not showing any signs of slowing down or changing his approach. During one of the chaotic exchanges, Bar manages to get a solid grip on Jaeyoung's arm, and as he does he finds himself thinking about just how incredibly difficult it is to bend the arm even slightly, which tells him a lot about what he is dealing with. Jaeyoung then uses his free arm to sneak in and land a cut on Bar's arm, but Bar responds immediately by grabbing him and hurling him hard into the wall with everything he has. The crowd watches that happen and a wave of surprise ripples through everyone there, because seeing the legendary Bar actually send someone flying into the wall like that is not something people get to witness every day. Hong Seal watches and thinks to herself that while Jaeyoung's body-hardening chi is genuinely impressive and hard to dismiss, if he can only apply it to his arms and not his entire body, then this fight has already reached its conclusion whether Jaeyoung knows it yet or not. The vice owner is also running his own thoughts about Bar as he watches, thinking back to how even he had wanted that kind of physicality for himself at one point in time. He thinks about how Bar carries a truly extraordinary body combined with the kind of experience that only gets refined and sharpened through countless brutal fights over many years. He also thinks about how in a mid-tier arena Bar has never really had anyone who could push him to his limits or give him a genuine challenge, and that someone with his level of ability could have easily gone on to become a top-tier fighter or landed a prestigious position as a government bodyguard for some high-ranking official a long time ago if things had gone differently. However, when the owner of Bar's old arena passes away from old age, plenty of people come forward and try to bring Bar onto their side by offering him really attractive and generous terms, but he turns every single one of them down without any hesitation. Because of that, everyone naturally assumes that he is going to pack up and leave the arena province entirely, but instead he ends up joining someone that nobody saw coming and that catches the whole community completely off guard. The vice owner still has no real understanding of why Bar made the choice to serve a woman who seemingly appeared out of nowhere with no established reputation behind her, and at this point he has stopped caring about figuring it out. Hong Seal then turns her attention to the fight and notices that Jaeyoung is pushing himself back up onto his feet once again, which genuinely surprises her because under normal circumstances anyone who had been slammed into a wall with that kind of force would have walked away with a broken back and nothing left to give. Bar watches Jaeyoung stand up and starts wondering to himself whether Jaeyoung might actually be running some kind of body hardening technique across his entire body that is allowing him to absorb damage at a level that should not be physically possible. The vice owner meanwhile has his own thoughts running through his head, and he thinks about how Bar has been the single biggest obstacle standing in the way of this entire operation going smoothly, and that for the plan to have any real chance of working out the way it needs to, Bar either has to be killed outright or put out of commission with serious enough injuries that he cannot interfere. Right at that tense moment, a mysterious figure slips in and presses a cloth soaked in something against Hongseal's nose, and she loses consciousness almost instantly. At the exact same time on the other side of things, Bar manages to drive Jaeyoung crashing hard into the wall once again with another powerful and decisive strike. The vice owner turns to the official and comments that the fight is getting more and more entertaining to watch with every passing moment and says that it is genuinely a shame that he has to step away from it. He then tells the official that he is going to go ahead and take control of the Lord's property and make sure she gets delivered safely to his house, and that once the match wraps up the official can head straight back without any issues. The match then continues and Bar puts on a display of raw and impressive strength that leaves Jaeyoung with virtually no room to fight back or create any kind of opening for himself. As the exchange goes on, Bar takes note of something specific about Jaeyoung and notices that his fingertips are as sharp and precise as blades while his fists carry the kind of crushing density that makes them feel like iron clubs when they connect. The official then turns to the vice owner and points out that Bar appears to have the clear upper hand in the fight and asks whether he is comfortable with how things are going. Despite taking a serious and relentless beating, Jaeyoung somehow finds the will to push himself back up onto his feet once again and face Bar. Jaeyoung glares at him and tells him with fury in his voice that he is nowhere near done and is not going to go down that easily, but also admits that Bar has genuinely gotten on his nerves in a way that is hard to shake. The vice owner watches all of this and thinks to himself that while it looks like Jaeyoung has absorbed a lot of hits throughout the fight, most of them are really just surface level scratches when you look closely, and that Bar is not going to come out of this completely fine either, because even the punches from Jaeyoung that did not land with perfect precision are still doing real and meaningful damage underneath it all. He also believes that at their level, those injuries won't stop him from using chi, but if Jaeyoung's attacks land cleanly even a couple of times. After that, Jaeyoung charges at Bar with bunch of moves, and he tries his best to dodge those. Meanwhile, the granny and chief are working together to clean up the dishes. The chief tells the granny to rest as much as she can because if she starts resting now, she will stay healthy and live longer. The chef then notices bunch of thugs entering the room, and she tells them that they are still cleaning. One of the guys says that they have to stay here, so they shouldn't worry about them. Hearing that, the chief looks around with a confused expression and wonders what on earth is going on with the atmosphere around here and why everyone is gathered in this spot when they should all be over at the training yard where they belong. Meanwhile, the fight between the slaves and the bad guys is still very much ongoing, but the slaves are somehow holding their own and managing to take down their opponents one by one through sheer determination and teamwork. Nadong calls out to his comrades and tells them that they absolutely need to get their hands on weapons as soon as possible, which means they have to make their way to the training yard right away, and on top of that they have to find Byong before anything else happens to him. As Nadong looks around and processes everything unfolding around him, he picks up on the fact that they are clearly not the only ones being targeted in all of this, and that the sheer scale and coordination of everything happening at once points very clearly to the fact that there is a specific goal behind it all and that somebody with a plan is pulling every string from behind the scenes. At the same time, Byong is locked in on the power-boosting chi that his opponent is putting out and thinks to himself that this guy's level might actually be right up there with Bar, which tells him everything he needs to know about how dangerous this fight really is. His opponent looks at him and tells him that he has absolutely no idea what someone like him, a complete nobody, is even relying on to act as tough as he does. Byong, however, is not focused on what his opponent is saying and instead his mind is running through the situation practically, concluding that without a sword in his hand he simply does not have what he needs to go head on against someone operating at this level, which means his only real option right now is to find a way to get out of there. However, before Byong even has a chance to make his move, his opponent drives into him once again and sends him crashing hard into the wall behind him. As Byong pulls himself together and takes in his surroundings, he notices that there are dead bodies scattered around in various spots throughout the area. Yuwon then looks down at him and tells him that his light footwork is decent enough, and that he had honestly just thought it would be a bit of fun to mess around with him for a while, but that when it comes down to it he is really no different from any of the other slaves around here. He then reaches down and draws his knife, saying that he is going to finish him off quickly and be done with the whole thing. He then releases his power-boosting chi all at once in a single explosive burst and launches himself into the air in one massive leap, but Byong reads the trajectory and manages to get completely out of the way before it connects. Byong lands, and the thought that immediately runs through his head is that this guy might actually be on an even higher level than Bar, which is not a comfortable realization to have in the middle of a fight. Yuan then follows up and drives a kick straight into Byong's ribs, adding even more damage on top of everything his body has already been put through. At the same time, the situation is getting just as dire on the other side of things as the other slaves find themselves completely boxed in and surrounded by the bad guys, who are calmly telling them that they are going to take turns killing each one of them off one by one. Nadong stands there taking it all in and thinks to himself that for this many people to have coordinated and launched something like this all at once, there has to be someone behind it all pulling the strings and running the whole operation as a deliberate plan. He then wonders if he should snatch a sword, only then can he hold out until Bar or Byong gets here. The chef then asks the thugs why they are locking them up, as if the owner finds out, they are going to be in big trouble. Upon hearing that, the thug starts laughing, which shows that he is not afraid of the owner at all. Right at that moment, the vice owner comes walking in, and the granny immediately makes her way toward him, telling him that once he hears about everything that has been going on, he is going to be absolutely stunned by it. She goes on to tell him that not only did the others go ahead and lock them up, but they even went so far as to threaten the other slaves on top of that. What happens next shocks everyone standing there, as the vice owner reaches out and slaps the granny hard across the face without any warning or hesitation. The chef immediately rushes over to her and breaks down crying, telling the vice owner through her tears that it does not matter what his title is because the owner is never going to forgive him for doing something like that. One of the vice owner's own slaves then comes forward, dragging Hong Seal along with her hands tied up behind her back, and right there in front of everyone the vice owner starts throwing punches at her without any restraint. Watching that unfold, one of the other slaves cannot just stand by and does not hesitate before jumping in and starting a fight with the vice owner's slave in response to what is happening. The vice owner then turns and gives a direct order to the arena fighter standing nearby to go ahead and take care of the slave who just stepped up. The slave realizes in that moment that he has absolutely no choice but to fight and steels himself for it. He moves in and swings his sword at the arena fighter, but the arena fighter does not even flinch at the incoming attack and casually stops it using just one hand like it is nothing. Watching what just happened, everyone around them gets hit with a wave of shock, and the general consensus spreading through the crowd is that this guy might actually be some kind of monster, and that with that level of raw strength on display, even if Byong shows up, there is simply no realistic way he is going to come out on top against someone like that. Hong Seal is visibly taken aback as well, and the vice owner takes that moment to casually mention to her that he never bothered to bring it up before, but that the fighter in question is actually capable of using light footwork on top of everything else. He then goes on to explain that it is limited to just his arms and cannot be applied across his whole body, but that even with that limitation it is still more than enough firepower to completely destroy Byong, the fighter she has been putting so much time and energy into developing over all these years. The vice owner then takes things a step further and says that someone like him, a person with a genuine eye for recognizing talented fighters and the practical ability to actually grow and run an arena successfully, is simply far better suited to owning and operating this place than she ever has been or ever will be. Deep down, Hong Seal thinks to herself that she was incredibly naive and foolish when she was first starting all of this out, and that when she was setting the arena up from the ground she needed someone who could handle the people and the politics in her place so she could focus on what she actually cared about. The vice owner had known exactly how to lower his head at the right moments and win people over with his charm and approachability, which made him look like the perfect fit for the role at the time. Hong Seal had trusted her own judgment and gone ahead and made him the vice owner based on all of that, and for a while it seemed like the right call as he ran the arena smoothly and efficiently and helped them grow into one of the more well-known mid-tier arenas in the whole province. At some point, once money started flowing into his hands and his attitude changed, but he brushed it off, thinking that position shares a person. Hong Seal then asks the vice owner why he is not killing her and how he didn't go this far. The vice owner tells her that he is going to make up a story that the owner dies in a slave revolt, and the vice owner takes over. The vice owner also tells her that there is one person who really wants her, and his reputation for how he treats women in private is horrifying. However, Hong Seal says that she already endured a hard life, so she is going to survive no matter what, and when she does, she is going to kill everyone here. The vice owner then turns to his slaves and gives them a cold and direct order to go ahead and kill everyone in the area and to make it as brutal and merciless as they possibly can. With that order given, the arena fighter and the other slaves are immediately thrown into a full-blown violent confrontation with each other. At the same time, Yuan keeps right on going after Byong and continues to attack him with as much brutality as he can put together, not letting up for even a second. Byong's mind is racing through the situation, and the one thing he keeps coming back to is that all he needs right now is a sword, and he starts pushing his way through toward the training yard where he knows the armory is located. When he finally gets there, the sight that greets him is the vice owner's people in the middle of brutally beating and cutting down the slaves without any mercy at all. Byong then quickly takes in the situation and realizes that the gate is locked from the inside, and that he is going to need a sword if he has any real chance of getting through to them and saving whoever is still alive. Na-dong and the others spot Byong and immediately start calling out to him, desperately telling him to just turn around and run away from all of this while he still can. But seeing everything happening in front of him does the opposite of calming Byong down, and a deep and overwhelming fury rises up inside him as the memory of his brother's death comes crashing back into his mind without warning. In that moment, he makes the decision to reach back and call upon the same chi that his brother once used, pushing himself toward something he has never fully tapped into before. Right at that moment, Yuan catches up from behind and drives a stab straight into Byong's back before he can react. As the pain hits him, Byong's mind drifts back to the very first time he ever picked up a sword in this place, and how the moment he used it he took down his opponent with a ease that surprised even himself, and how it felt in that moment like his entire martial arts had jumped up to a completely new level all at once. That experience had planted a thought in Byong's head that if he trained with weapons he could get stronger at a much faster rate than he ever could going barehanded, and from that point on he sets a clear goal for himself that if he can combine sword work together with both power-boosting chi and body-hardening chi running at the same time, he is going to reach a level of strength far beyond anything he can currently access. Because of that goal, except during sessions of pure physical conditioning, he never once let go of his sword and treats it as an extension of himself at all times. However, no matter how many years go by and no matter how hard he pushes himself in training, like his very life depends on every single session, he still cannot figure out how to access any chi other than the light footwork technique he had already learned as a young child. Dipping back into a flashback, Byong had once asked his brother directly why their training never involves any weapons when picking one up could clearly make them stronger so much more quickly. His brother had sat him down and explained that their father's martial arts were something he developed and built entirely around fighting with bare hands and nothing else. He goes on to explain that the moment a person picks up a weapon, the way their muscles move and engage shifts in ways that are not always obvious, and along with that the natural flow of chi through the body also changes in subtle but meaningful ways that can disrupt the whole system their father had created. Furthermore, he says that in their father's style, they have to feel and control their muscle and chi flow with a bare body, and even the slightest change in that flow is like the difference between heaven and earth. So, that is the reason why they can only learn their father's martial arts barehanded. He also says that their father's martial arts are far stronger than any weapon. Byong then channels his power and uses it to snap Yuan's knife clean in half, and Yuan stands there telling himself that Byong just got lucky and that the knife breaking was nothing more than a fortunate accident. Byong, however, does not let that slide and tells him to stay right where he is and pay close attention, because he is about to show him exactly how much he is going to make him suffer before this is all over. Using nothing but one bare hand, Byong then drives into the iron bars and destroys them completely, and then calmly starts walking through the opening he just created. Earlier, Bar had sat down with Hong Seal and explained to her that Byong's control and command over chi is already sitting at a level that puts him on par with top-tier masters, and that on top of that he uses a unique and specialized style that channels his chi specifically through a technique called Jingak. Bar had also told her that the moment Byong's chi fully manifests and he unlocks its true potential, he is going to become someone that nobody in the world is going to be capable of defeating. Back to the present, the entire room is consumed by shock as everyone processes the sight of Byong actually using power-boosting chi right in front of their eyes. When one of the slaves loyal to the vice owner charges straight at Byong with the intention of cutting him down, Byong activates his body-hardening chi and drives his fist directly into the attacker's face with devastating force. Byong then looks around at the rest of them and tells them that there is absolutely no need to rush any of this, because he is going to get to every last one of them before the night is over. The arena fighter that the vice owner brought along still cannot bring himself to fully accept what he is seeing, struggling to wrap his head around the fact that Byong has somehow managed to use body hardening. He thinks through what he knows about it and reminds himself that when someone attacks with body hardening chi fully activated, the impact that lands hits with the same kind of crushing force as the face of a steel mace connecting at full swing. However, he then thinks about what it would mean if someone could actually use both body hardening and power boosting chi at the exact same time, and concludes that if Byong had been doing that, the person on the receiving end of that strike would not just be injured but would have had their head taken clean off entirely. He also thinks about how denting iron bars with nothing but bare hands is something that would require both techniques running simultaneously to even be physically possible in the first place. The arena fighter then settles on a conclusion that gives him some degree of comfort, which is that while being able to use power-boosting chi on top of everything else is genuinely incredible and impressive, as long as Byong is not the kind of monster who can actually run both techniques at the same time, all it really means is that he has more weapons available to him than the average fighter and nothing more beyond that. Byong then turns and addresses everyone there, telling them plainly that he does not care in the slightest whether they end up killing each other or not when it comes to the vice owner's people. He then says that the slaves and the others here are a completely different story because they are not like those people, and they are not like him either, as they have never walked a path built entirely around slaughter and killing. He also opens up and admits that he himself came into all of this carrying nothing but killing intent in his heart, and that it was the slaves and the chefs of this place who somehow reached through all of that and gave him the first real warmth he had ever felt. After that, Byong starts killing everyone with just bare hand, and the arena fighter is surprised that Byong is even using body hardening on his legs, and he is sure that he can't use another chi technique at the same time. Everyone present then notices that Yuan is also there in the mix, and the vice owner feels a surge of confidence as he thinks to himself that with Yuan's power boosting and Momon's body hardening working together on the same side, there is absolutely no way they can lose this. Yuan, however, is thinking through the situation from a much more tactical angle, and his conclusion is that body hardening is far from the unbeatable and invincible technique that people tend to assume it is, because a steel club being swung with the full force of power-boosting chi behind it carries enough raw destructive power to smash straight through body hardening without much trouble at all. Byong decides he is done waiting and charges straight at Momon, and Momon watches him coming and thinks to himself that this fight is going to be wrapped up quickly and easily because every single time Byong attacks, his chi ends up concentrated and focused in just one specific place rather than being distributed properly. He also thinks about how right now his own body hardening is sitting concentrated in his hands, which means every other part of his body is completely exposed and vulnerable to being absolutely crushed by a well-placed swing of the steel club. Then in an instant that nobody sees coming, Byong moves with terrifying speed and tears Momon's right arm apart completely, and the shock that ripples through everyone watching is immediate and overwhelming as people start saying out loud that Byong simply cannot be human. Byong then shifts his attention and spots Yuan already charging straight at him and looks over at him and says that he already told him to wait his turn. Yuan stands there with his nerves completely shot, thinking to himself that he had always known there was supposed to be a level where someone could simultaneously use both power-boosting chi and body-hardening chi together at the same time, but that this is the very first occasion in his entire life where he is actually standing in front of something like that and seeing it with his own eyes. As he takes it all in, Yuan thinks that the reality of it is actually a little different from the way he had always pictured it in his head. The vice owner is equally losing his composure on the other side of things, his mind spinning as he tries to process how something like what he is witnessing is even physically possible, and the thought hitting him hardest is that if his entire plan falls apart right here and now because of this, the people behind him are going to have him killed without any hesitation. He then turns to Yuan and gives him a direct and desperate order to get in there and do something about it, telling him to go after Byong and finish him off, and sweetening the demand by promising to pay him 10 times his standard fight fee to make it worth his while. Yuan, however, is completely paralyzed by fear in a way he has never experienced before, and he thinks about how throughout his entire fighting career he has never once been afraid to step up against someone stronger than himself. What he is looking at right now is something on an entirely different level, and he thinks to himself that this is not the kind of overwhelming strength where a solution can be found because stepping in would simply mean dying on the spot without any chance of recovery. Yuan then lets his weapon fall from his hand and drops it to the ground, announcing openly that he is accepting his defeat right here and now because he has absolutely no desire to throw his life away. Byong says that it doesn't matter as he killed so many people, but Yuan tells him that he only fight people who are worth fighting and he didn't kill anyone. One of the bald guys then puts a knife over Hongseal's neck, saying if Byong move recklessly, he is going to kill her. The vice owner also takes out his sword and puts over the chef's head. The vice owner then tells Byong that no matter how strong he is, he can't just kill them both and save the hostages at the same time. He then instructs the others to attack Byong as now he can't move easily. Meanwhile, Bar and Jiang are still locked in their fight and both of them continue to put on a genuinely impressive display that keeps everyone watching completely riveted. Bar thinks to himself that if this exchange keeps going the way it is only a matter of time before he ends up eating a hit that he is not going to be able to just shake off. Bar then makes his move and grabs Jiang's arm to send him flying into the wall again the same way he has been doing, but this time it does not work out the way he planned as Jaeyoung uses his other hand to get in and injure Bar before the throw can be completed cleanly. Right at that moment, Bar reaches for his knife and drives it across one of Jaeyoung's eyes in one sharp and precise motion. Seeing that land, Jaeyoung's owner immediately tenses up with nerves because he had already made it clear to Jaeyoung beforehand that letting his guard slip was not something he could afford to do. He also thinks to himself that in most fighters, taking a hit like that to the eye triggers an instinctive freeze response born from the sudden fear of death, leaving them unable to move or react properly. Jaeyoung stands there in that moment and finds himself wondering whether Bar had been working toward this exact outcome from the very beginning of the fight and had been setting it up the whole time. The owner then thinks to himself that Jaeyoung should never have pulled his hand back when he did and should have just kept driving it forward with everything he had instead of hesitating. After that brief exchange, Bar moves in and takes out Jaeyoung's other eye as well and then draws his knife across Jaeyoung's neck in a clean and deliberate motion, making it absolutely clear to everyone watching that there is nothing weak or past his prime about him whatsoever. The crowd starts talking among themselves and says that at first the two of them looked like they were on completely even footing, but that as the fight went on it started to feel more and more like Bar was sitting just a few steps ahead of where Jaeyoung could reach. Bar however thinks to himself that while it might look from the outside like a comfortable and straightforward win, the truth is that the outcome was decided by the absolute thinnest of margins and could have gone either way in a single moment. He also thinks about how if his strike had been even slightly slower than it was, he would have been the one lying on the ground instead of Jaeyoung. He comes to the honest conclusion that the only real difference between winning and losing in that exchange came down to Jaeyoung's carelessness and overconfidence getting the better of him at the worst possible moment. One of the officials standing nearby is still visibly shaken and thinks that he never expected the fight to end the way it did, and that he certainly never anticipated that Jaeyoung's body-hardening chi would end up being completely outclassed and rendered ineffective right from the very start of things. He thinks about how Bar never once allowed the intimidating nature of body-hardening chi to get inside his head and rattle him, and that even when he was right on the edge of losing he still had the mental clarity and resolve to recognize his window and take it without flinching. In the official's personal assessment, when it comes purely to chi techniques Jaeyoung was the stronger of the two, but in every quality that actually ends up deciding the outcome of a real fight Bar was clearly the one who stood above. However, even after sitting through a fight of that quality and intensity, the official finds that he does not feel much of anything anymore when it comes to being moved or impressed by what he watches. As far as he is concerned, he lost any real interest in Jaeyoung years ago, and that feeling has not changed. When he had gone to pay his respects to an elder who carries influence and authority equal to that of a prime minister, he had been treated as a guest with a level of respect that left a lasting impression on him. But once he saw that man's martial arts, it made sense because that man could shake an entire nation. He was a warrior from Goryeo named Gwangmu. The official then looks at Jaeyoung and thinks about how he was from a poor warrior family, supposedly went crazy and killed his own father during training. They said he would become a deranged killer who enjoyed slaughter, but to his eyes, he was just a kid who found using his strength fun. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Bar is dealing with the reality of his injury and comes to the unsettling realization that the wound is sitting a lot deeper than he initially thought, which means recovering from it is not going to be a quick or easy process. He also finds himself wondering why none of the overseers have shown up yet given everything that has been happening, because there is not a single scream or any kind of signal coming from anywhere that would explain the complete silence. Back where Jaeyoung is, he finds himself completely surrounded by a group of people closing in on him from multiple directions at once. Hongseal feels a deep sense of frustration and embarrassment at having been turned into a hostage by people she considers absolute trash, and as much as she believes in Jaeyoung's strength she also understands the reality that no matter how powerful he is, saving every single person all at the same time is simply not something anyone can pull off. Jaeyoung on the other hand is barely holding himself together on the inside, because the one thing he absolutely cannot bring himself to accept is watching another person die right in front of his eyes ever again after everything he has already been through. Just as the vice-owner moves to execute one of the hostages, Jaeyoung explodes into action and manages to destroy half of the vice-owner's body in a single devastating instant before he can follow through. Jaeyoung thinks to himself that he still has to keep pushing and hold out because there are more of them left that he needs to get through and take down before this is over. When Jaeyoung finally turns around to face the rest of them, every single arena fighter and slave still standing immediately drops to their knees and starts begging for forgiveness. The sight of everyone dropping to their knees sends a wave of surprise through the room. Yuan thinks to himself that they are only now beginning to truly grasp the reality of the situation they are in, and that begging for their lives at this point at least gives them the tiniest sliver of a chance at making it out of this alive. Byong then spots one of the slaves from before standing among the group, and the moment that slave realizes Byong has noticed him, he immediately panics and starts explaining himself, saying that he never actually wanted any part of this but that he was following orders and felt like he had no choice. He goes on to say that he knows he should have done something to stop them or at least try to get in their way and slow things down, but that he simply does not have the skill or the courage that something like that would have required. Byong studies him for a moment and comes to the conclusion that the guy does not appear to be making any of that up. Byong then turns his attention and notices the vice owner on the ground screaming and writhing in pain, having lost one of his arms in the chaos of everything that went down. One of the slaves then moves over and begins untying Hong Seal, and the moment she gets herself free she snaps into action and tells the chef to go immediately and find a doctor somewhere in the guest room area, and to make sure the granny gets the treatment she needs as soon as possible. She then turns to Nadong and tells him to go get himself looked at and treated as well, but Nadong says that he does not want to do that right now because there is someone he needs to stay close to at this moment. However, Byong looks around and notices the wounds that some of them are carrying, and tells them all to go get themselves treated and come back quickly so that together they can give their beloved fallen slave the proper and meaningful farewell send-off that he deserves. Hong Seal then reaches down and picks up a sword, gripping it firmly as she walks with steady and deliberate steps toward the vice owner. The moment he sees her coming toward him with that look on her face, he completely breaks down and starts crying, desperately begging her to find it in herself to forgive him just this once and insisting that things were never supposed to go anywhere near this far when it all started. He also admits through his tears that he could never stomach the fact that she kept prioritizing Byong and his development over the actual business of running the arena properly, and that over time he had convinced himself that Byong was nothing but an obstacle standing in the way of what the arena needed to be. Yuan stands off to the side taking all of this in and thinks to himself that judging by the fact that the vice owner had kept Byong sitting as nothing more than a fight slave this entire time, even he clearly had no real idea of what Byong was actually capable of and what kind of potential had been sitting right in front of him the whole time. The vice owner then shifts his approach and tries a different angle, telling Hong Seal that if she is willing to let him live he will give her the full list of every single person who was involved in the plot against her and hold nothing back. However, Hong Seal asks him if he really thinks she didn't know about it. She says that suddenly a guy asking for a match, that well-backed guest joining him, and the stunt he pulled all made sense. After that, Hong Seal kills the vice owner saying he was an idiot for thinking she would spare him for something that flimsy. Hong Seal then kills the rest of the slaves that took the vice owner's side. Hong Seal then tells Byong to take care of Yuan. Upon hearing what Byong says, Yuan quietly comes to terms with the fact that tonight is the night he is going to die. And as he sits with that reality he thinks to himself that choosing to accept death with dignity rather than dying in an ugly and desperate scramble while clawing for survival is the last real decision that belongs entirely to him and no one else. What happens next however catches him completely off guard, as Byong straight up refuses to go through with killing him, telling him plainly that he cannot bring himself to take the life of someone who is not posing any kind of threat and does not even have the will to fight back. Yuan then shifts his thoughts and figures that Hong Seal is going to be the one to finish him off instead, and the idea of dying at her hand sits so badly with him that he starts thinking he might have to find the will to fight after all just to avoid that outcome. Hong Seal however surprises everyone by saying that they should not kill him, and she backs that up by explaining that based on the way he reacted in that moment, she is fully convinced that a man who had already accepted his own death and made peace with it is not someone who lies. She also brings up the fact that Yuan had made it clear that he only ever goes after people he considers worth fighting, and that if the only person he went after during all of this was Byong, then it is obvious that he had no real investment in the vice owner's plot whatsoever and was only ever there for the fight itself and nothing beyond that. Hong Seal then thinks to herself that she already knew from the beginning that Byong was never going to kill Yuan, because that is simply the kind of person he is at his core and she has known that for a long time. Hong Seal then turns her attention to the other slave who had been caught up in everything, and tells him that she is going to spare his life as well, explaining that when she came back to her senses and took stock of everything happening around her, he was one of the people she noticed standing there. She says that he weren't holding a weapon and his face showed he didn't like what they were doing. Hong Seal then tells Yuan that he can leave now if he wants, as she won't hold him responsible or report him to the authorities over this, but if he rather stays, she will hire him as a fighter. The following day, Hong Seal makes her way over to check in on Bar and asks him how he is holding up and what his current condition is looking like. Bar is visibly weakened and not looking like himself, and Hong Seal tells him that according to the doctor, if the wound had gone even the slightest bit deeper than it did, treating it properly would have become an incredibly difficult and uncertain situation. She then asks him whether Jiang turned out to be as strong as she had suspected, and Bar confirms that Jiang had the ability to apply his body hardening across his entire body rather than just specific parts of it, which put him in a completely different category from most fighters using that technique. Bar then brings up the fact that he heard Jiang pulled out multiple different chi techniques during the chaos of the night before in order to save everyone, and he reflects on it by saying that he had always had a feeling that Jiang's martial arts were going to suddenly explode and reach a new level at some point, but that getting there in a single instant the way he apparently did is something that genuinely amazes him. Bar then tells Hongseal that even though he has not seen Jiang's martial arts directly with his own eyes in their current state, what he is absolutely certain of is that the gap sitting between where Jiang is right now and the people that Hongseal is ultimately going after is still absolutely enormous and cannot be closed overnight. He explains that the men she has her sights set on sit at the very top of the entire arena province, and that beyond even that there are a small and select handful of warriors out there who stand on equal footing with army generals and princes of the imperial court itself. Bar thinks through what it would mean if Jiang were to go up against any of those people right now, and the conclusion he arrives at is that if that fight happens, Jiang is simply not going to come out of it alive. However, Hongseal says that as long as she can create the situation that she need, that's enough. Bar then tells her that he can lay down his life to repay her kindness, but Jiang is different as he has his own vow he must fulfill. He also says that he don't think Thai can send him into a fight where he will die over something that has nothing to do with that vow. Hongseal asks him why haven't he stopped him from entering fights until now, and he was the one who expected Jiang to become someone no one could defeat. Later, Nadong and the other slave are holding a memorial for their fallen slave who passed away. Jiang then thinks about the time he spent with that slave who always used to look after him in small but meaningful ways. He remembers the time when he had no shoes to wear and that same slave had gone out and come back with a brand new pair for him without being asked. Everyone around them had been completely stunned when they saw that, because this was the same person who refused to spend a single coin on anything for himself on the grounds that every bit of money he had needed to go toward paying off his price so he could get back to his family and home as fast as possible, and yet he had turned around without hesitation and spent it on Jiang instead. The slave had looked at everyone's surprised faces and simply told them that whenever he looks at Jiang, he is reminded of his younger brothers back home, and that is all there is to it. That same night, all the slaves settle in and lie down together, and someone suggests that they should go around and talk about how each one of them ended up in this place and what their lives looked like before all of this. One of them starts things off by saying that he had already been living as a beggar kid for as long as he could remember, and that as he got older he reached a point where he simply could not stand the self-appointed leader running the beggar gang anymore and made the decision to break away and start living completely on his own. He explains that the winters were genuinely brutal and hard to survive every single year, but that catching birds and rabbits and making his own way through life without anyone telling him what to do had given him a sense of peace and freedom that he had actually come to appreciate quite a lot. Nadong then opens up and shares his story with everyone, explaining that he started out as someone who was completely clueless about how the world worked and had no real understanding of anything beyond the small bubble he grew up in, and that his mother had come from Goryeo, which meant that even as he got older and grew up the stares and whispered comments from the people in his village never really faded away or stopped following him around. He also says that the moment he finally stepped out into the wider world on his own, everything he had fell apart almost immediately and he ended up in the situation he is in now without really understanding how it all happened so fast. One of the others then speaks up and shares that his own road had been incredibly hard in its own way, explaining that the pressure of trying to provide enough for his family and his wife had become too heavy a burden for him to carry on his own no matter how hard he tried. That last part catches everyone completely off guard, as they all react with genuine surprise to find out that he had actually had a wife this whole time while the rest of them had been going through everything completely alone without anyone waiting for them. Back in the present moment, Jiang finds his eyes filling up with tears, and he thinks to himself that more than anything he had wanted to see every single one of them find their way back home safely. Somewhere else entirely, an official has gotten hold of a doctor who works at Hongseal's arena and is pressing him for information about what he witnessed there. The doctor tells the official that he stumbled across a strange and disturbing corpse completely by accident, and that the entire body looked as though it had been violently torn apart into pieces in a way he had never seen before in all his years of practice. The official stands there and the shock hits him hard as he processes what he is hearing, thinking to himself that for a body to end up torn apart in the way that was described, whoever did it would have to be swinging something with the weight of a steel mace at a speed that is almost impossible to comprehend. He thinks further and works through what he knows, concluding that even at a high level of power-boosting chi, the most a fighter can really do is swing a mace with a light and somewhat controlled force, and that only someone who has reached the absolute top tier of mastery could ever generate enough speed to swing something like that at the kind of insane pace that would cause that level of damage. The official then shifts the conversation and asks the doctor specifically about Byong and what condition he was in when he saw him, and the doctor responds by saying that Byong was dealing with some seriously significant injuries at the time. Back at the cell, Byong is already training despite everything his body has been through, and as he moves he thinks about how without being able to properly use his left side he simply cannot access his full strength the way he needs to, and that no matter what movement or technique he is performing, every single muscle throughout the entire body has to be working in sync and harmony with everything else for it to come together properly. He also thinks through the mechanics of something as seemingly straightforward as a single thrust with the right hand, and realizes that even that requires the legs to stabilize and support the body, the waist to rotate and generate momentum, and the left arm to pull back in order to actually put meaningful power behind it. He also reflects on how in order to pull out the absolute maximum strength that light footwork alone is capable of producing, he had trained himself to feel and consciously direct chi through every tiny and individual muscle in his body without leaving anything out. He also holds on to the belief that once his current injuries fully heal and his movement returns to the clean and precise state it needs to be in, he is going to be able to unleash a level of strength that will not lose to anyone standing in front of him. However, there is still one problem that Byong thinks that he has, which is that this strength is on a completely different level from light footwork, and it feels like his whole body are going to fall apart. The next day, one of the officials finds a guy going to fight a match first thing in the morning. The guy tells the official that he was a general and got thrown out empty-handed for losing a few men, so he came here because he heard there's a fighter here who accepts any challenge. He also says that he came here because he heard there's a fighter here who accepts any challenge. The guy's opponent then steps forward and makes his position very clear, saying that if he dies right here then this mansion, all of his accumulated wealth, and even the entire arena province itself will recognize and treat him as their honored master going forward. The massive guy standing there takes a look at his opponent's sword and notices that the shape of it is a little unusual and different from what he is used to seeing, but he brushes it off and tells himself that in front of an axe that moves as fast as the wind, something like that amounts to absolutely nothing worth worrying about. The match then gets underway with the guy charging straight at his opponent right out of the gate, but the rich guy reads the attack and manages to get out of the way before it connects. In the very next instant, the opponent cuts him down and ends it right there, and what becomes terrifyingly clear in that moment is that this person is not just someone who can use power-boosting chi once and let it fade, but someone who can sustain it continuously at a speed that is genuinely horrifying to witness. After the fight concludes, an official steps forward and approaches him with a request, saying that he needs to borrow a warrior who is not officially registered as a fighter and who operates at a top-tier level. The bald guy looks at him and asks him straight up why he would ever agree to let him borrow that particular fighter, and the official explains that there is someone out there who strikes carry enough raw destructive power to tear a human body completely apart, and that is the kind of threat that has been brought to his attention. The official then thinks to himself that if there is genuinely a master out there operating at that kind of level, he is going to have to get involved and offer his strength if for no other reason than pure curiosity about what he might find. What catches him off guard, however, is that the bald guy tells him straight up that there is no need to borrow any of his subordinates, because he is planning to go himself and handle it personally. The official quickly steps in and points out that the enemy in question is also an arena, and that if he personally goes and kills someone connected to it they are going to find themselves in serious trouble over it before long. He also brings up the fact that there is a standing rule within the arena province that only arenas of the same rank are permitted to go up against each other, which puts some important limitations on how they can approach the situation. The bald guy then tells him to go ahead and lay out all the details of the situation for him, and says that if what he hears sounds entertaining enough to be worth his time, he is willing to lend him as many men as he needs without any further argument. Meanwhile, somewhere out on the streets, a girl is sitting right in the middle of the road eating something without a care in the world, and a guy sitting beside her looks over and tells her that she really should find a proper place to sit down and eat instead of doing it out here like this. The girl then asks him why this arena province has more ordinary people than warriors. The girl then says that they should hurry up and find the vice leader, as it's been long since he left the caravan. The guy asks her where she is going to search when she don't even know the location. Sometime later, they arrive at Hongseal's palace to meet her. The maid informs them that she left just a while ago, and she don't know when she is going to be back. In the meantime, Hongseal and Byong are walking outside, and she even buys him some new clothes to wear. She then tells him to keep wearing it until they get around to fixing what he already has, and points out that there is no good reason to go around drawing unnecessary attention to himself when he is outside the arena. Hong Seal then finds herself thinking about how she used to take him out with her every now and then when he was younger, but that it has been such a long time since the two of them went out together like this that it almost feels unfamiliar. Byung looks at her and starts to figure out that the reason she brought him out here was because she wanted to ask him something, but then realizes that she is not actually going through with asking it. Hong Seal then speaks up and tells him plainly that he is genuinely strong now, and that there are not many people left in the entire arena province who could actually stand their ground against him in a real fight, which means walking away from this place and leaving it all behind would not be a particularly difficult thing for him to pull off at this point. Since Byung looks like he is not quite following where she is going with all of this, she clarifies by saying that she is simply curious about one thing, which is whether he is going to keep fighting all the way to the very end or whether he is going to turn and run when things get hard enough. Byung looks at her and tells her without any hesitation that running away is something he is never going to do again, because now that he has the strength he has been building toward, he wants to stand and face whatever and whoever comes at him head on. Right at that moment, a guy walking by bumps straight into Byung, and when Byung gets a look at him he turns out to be a noticeably bulkier version of someone who looks just like Gojo. The moment Hong Seal lays eyes on him, the surprise hits her immediately because the person standing there turns out to be none other than Gukjo, one of the absolute top fighters operating anywhere in the entire arena province. Hong Seal finds herself wondering what on earth he is doing all the way out here, because someone of his reputation has absolutely no business showing up in this particular area. Byung picks up on something coming off of Gukjo that puts him on edge right away, and he thinks to himself that the way this guy talks feels like it is completely soaked in killing intent, and he quietly wonders to himself whether it would even be acceptable to get into a fight out here in the open outside of the arena. Gukjo then turns to the person beside him and tells them not to bother going after someone as clueless as Byung, who by all appearances looks like nothing more than some kid who has wandered in from outside of town and has no idea where he even is. Byung then shifts his gaze and notices that there is a whole bunch of massive and intimidating-looking people trailing along behind Gukjo, and that sight alone is enough to make him genuinely uneasy in a way he does not try to hide. Byung then thinks to himself that when the other person is clearly willing to just walk away and let the whole thing go, there is simply no good reason to push for a fight over it. Hong Seal waits until they are gone and then tells Byung that he got lucky today because if things had escalated any further it would have turned into something very big and very messy very fast. She then tells him that even if Byung had been at his absolute best and peak condition, Gukjo would still have been an incredibly tough and dangerous opponent to try to get the better of, because he stands as one of the single strongest people anywhere in the arena province. However, Byung thinks that if he could fight him and his men alone, it would be a perfect training. Hong Seal tells him that once his injuries heal, he will have to face people like that and asks if he can handle that. Byung asks her why she keeps saying the same thing and wonders if she feels bad about making him fight monsters like that. He says that every fight he take here is his decision and if his fights help her, that's even better. Just then, the girl from before runs straight towards Hong Seal and hugs her. Later at tea time, the girl tells Hong Seal that she haven't seen her since she suddenly dropped by the caravan 3 years ago and says that she should have shown her around his arena. Hong Seal says that arena is no place for a young lady like her, as she is not even of age yet. The girl then turns her attention to Byung and looks him over, figuring that he seems to be around the same age as her, and casually asks if he can show her around the arena sometime, but Hong Seal shuts that idea down immediately and firmly before it can go any further. Byung looks at the girl and says that his own life is a complete mess by any measure, but that she on the other hand looks like she comes from a good and well-established noble household and carries herself like it. The guy accompanying the girl does not take kindly to Byung's comment at all and gets furious, turning to Hong Seal and telling her that he wants to teach this slave of hers a lesson for speaking out of turn like that. Hong Seal however corrects him right away and makes it clear that Byung is not her slave in any sense of the word, but rather the top fighter representing her arena. Hearing that stops the guy completely in his tracks and he finds it genuinely hard to accept, looking Byung up and down and saying that no matter how he looks at him from any angle, he just looks like a completely ordinary boy and nothing more than that. Hong Seal then shifts her attention to the girl and brings up the fact that she has heard she is in the process of learning how to run a caravan operation, and points out that with that kind of education underway, the arena province is really not the kind of place that should be treated as a casual and relaxed vacation destination. The girl then gets serious and explains that several caravans operating out of Gongju have been running into serious trouble lately and that they are in urgent need of trained and capable guards to protect them. She also mentions that the bandits responsible for the attacks have been proving themselves to be significantly stronger than regular army troop, and that the leader among them is so terrifyingly powerful that he is capable of tearing guard captains apart with nothing but his bare hands. Hong Seal listens to all of that and thinks to herself that it sounds like a pretty significant exaggeration, and she tells the girl straight that there are only a very small handful of masters operating at that kind of level even here in the Arena province, which is a place where serious warriors from all corners come together to compete and train. She goes on to say that if there is any chance at all that what she is describing is actually true, then going to the army for help would be a far more sensible and appropriate move than trying to hire arena fighters for something like that. The guy then jumps in and pushes back, pointing out that the moment the army catches sight of silver ingots they are going to keep coming back and demanding more and more money indefinitely, which is going to become an increasingly heavy and unsustainable burden over time. He argues that in the same situation, if they are willing to spend a decent amount up front and secure a small number of genuinely strong warriors for the job, that arrangement ends up being far more cost-effective and profitable in the long run. After going back and forth on it, Hong Seal eventually agrees to look into finding a one-time escort job that a fighter from her arena could take on. The girl then asks hopefully whether Byong specifically could be the one to go with them, but Hong Seal tells her that it is simply not possible right now because he is currently dealing with injuries that have not fully healed yet. Meanwhile, somewhere completely different, a man is sprinting through the middle of a dense jungle with a group of warriors hot on his heels and closing in fast. But the warriors uses body-hardening chi and several others to finally caught him. Before they could listen to him, one of them manages to kill him on the spot. One of them suggests that they should be lying low for a while, but the main guy says that they can't. At that moment, a mysterious guy from Shadows arrives and says that they are moving as a cell system so no one can trace them. He also mentions that he found a good plan, that one of the big caravans, the Jiang family trading company, is recruiting fighters. He also reveals that tomorrow he will be joining the Jiang caravan as one of their escort warriors. How long do you think it will take for Byong to fully master all three chi techniques and close the gap between himself and the top warriors of the Arena province? Comment Goryeo if you'd like a part 2 of this series. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more sports manhwa recaps.